Oh, hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of Mighty Blaze, and I'm just so completely thrilled tonight because we have Jessica Anya Blau here. I have loved every single one of her books since forever. We share the same agent. She's this amazing person. And her new book, Marianne, which you can see right behind her, it's so completely extraordinary. And I'm not the only person who thinks it's extraordinary. She has, let's see, Joanna Rakoff, author of My Salinger Year, says, Mary Jane is that rare thing, an utterly charming, absurdly delightful novel that makes you think about the world around you. Jessica Anya Blau's clear-eyed wit reminded me of Curtis Sittenfeld and Laurie Colwin, and of course, Jane Austen. Can't do better than that. We have Kevin Wilson, author of Nothing to See Here, who also raves beyond raves, says, I dare you to find a more winning novel than Jessica Anya Blau's Mary Jane, filled with humor and sharpness and so much light. Nick Hornby. How can you get a blurb from Nick Hornby? That is like the epitome of cool, has said, I love Mary Jane. It's about an oppressed teenager being given a jolt of life and love by an eccentric found family of therapists. A child, a rock star, and a movie star in the 1970s. It's funny, sad, sharp, charming, surprising, big-hearted, and true both to his character and his time. If you have ever sung along to a hit on the radio in any decade, then you will devour Mary Jane at 45 RPM. It's amazing. Also, I want to point out that Jessica got a rave in the New York Times and an even bigger rave in InStyle, correct?
Style. Yeah.
And it's like everybody is just going bananas over this book, and including myself, and rightly so. So let's do the bio first, and then we'll pepper Jessica with questions. Okay. Jessica Anya Blau was born in Boston and raised in Southern California. She moved to Toronto and then Baltimore and New York. Her novels have been featured in, get ready for this great list, The Today Show, CNN, NPR, Cosmo, Vanity Fair, Buzz, Time Out, Parade, Oprah, and other national publications. Jessica's short stories and essays have been published in numerous magazines, journals, and anthologies. Jessica co-wrote the script for Love on the Run, a movie I've seen, starring Frances. Yeah, it's great. I loved it. I'm going to watch it again now that I know that she wrote it. Starring Frances Fisher and Steve Howley. She's taught writing, and she currently lives in New York. She's the author of The Trouble with Lexi, The Wonderbird Summer, The Summer of Naked Swim Parties, Drinking Closer to Home, and her latest, Mary Jane. Welcome, yes. Jessica. We're so thrilled to have you here. I can't tell you.
Thank you for having me. I'm your biggest fan, so this is.
You don't have to say that.
It's true, though. It is.
So I want to say that I have so many questions for you because this book is truly wonderful. And I feel like it's the book that we all need to be reading now because it just makes you feel good. And I always want to know, like, what's the impetus for writing this particular book? And did it in any way differ from any other book you've ever written?
Well, it didn't. I mean, it sort of did because I kind of wrote it. I had been ghostwriting and I got fired from a ghostwriting job.
Oh, I have to ask you about that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I got fired from a ghostwriting job that had been really, I mean, it had been great because it was this really interesting, fun, smart, beautiful celebrity. And, she was fun to hang out with. And I was having a great time with her. And she decided to write the book herself. She didn't. So I got fired and I was so upset and hurt at being fired. We had read her diaries. And after we read them, I said, you should just publish these because they were so well written. They were so smart. And anyway, a couple of days later, I was fired. So, so I was so, when you get fired, it's like, having somebody break your heart or somebody end a friendship, it's just like that. And so it was in that sort of fit of grief, shame, humiliation.
Right.
Rage that I was just like, oh, I'm just going to write what I want to write. Because when you're ghostwriting, every page is like, combed over and approved. You have to write in their voice the way they want to say it. And you Have you ever ghostwritten?
I did one. I did one ghostwritten thing about this guy who was a famous bank robber, and it was a nightmare. It's sort of, I did not do well on that job, so it's hard.
It's hard. I mean, I've been lucky enough that all the people I've done it for have been these really wonderful, interesting, fascinating people. But even with the greatest person, it's hard because you have to do it in their voice the way they want to say it. And sometimes you're thinking, you know what, like it would sound so much better if you said this or you said it this way. So it's really hard to sort of do less than what you would want to do. Like you want to make something smart and interesting and this, and somebody's like, I just want to say this. So it was this almost reflex of like, I was just sort of bursting with shame and, and all those kind of things. And it was this reflex, just sit down and write exactly what I wanted to write. And so I sat down and started Mary Jane. I mean, I think the first page is the first page I wrote.
That's incredible. It's such a wonderful book. I want to ask you about, I read something about you in a magazine that I love, where you said that Mary Jane was your ode to Ann Tyler and that you actually met her in a grocery store. Please, would you tell us that story? Because it's just too wonderful for words.
So before I moved to Baltimore, I had read all her books and I love her. I mean,
she's wonderful.
She's amazing. And her books are amazing. And so I was moving to Baltimore and I didn't know anything about Baltimore when I moved there. I went there for graduate school. And so I knew all her books. So in my head, Baltimore looked like, we're making Leary, I think his last name's Leary, lives, and the Accidental Tourist, and Baltimore looked just like that. And the streets look like that. And sure enough, that neighborhood is right next to Johns Hopkins, where I went to graduate school. And so sure enough, the neighborhood did look like that. And it did look like an Ann Tyler book. And it was sort of like, wow. And so I moved into the neighborhood in which her books are set. And so it was like, I happened to be living there on those streets, with those houses and near those people. And she also was living right there. So I was in the little market that, and it's like, Baltimore's like a big city that feels like a quaint little town.
Mm-hmm.
Run into people and everybody knows each other and you see people. I mean, it's just such a small town city. And so there's this little market near the house where I lived. And I was in the market and the woman in front of me said, I'll put that on my account. She didn't pull out a wallet. I don't even think she had a purse. I'll put that on my account. And they pulled out a piece of paper and she wrote down her name. And I looked at her name and it was Ann Tyler. And I thought, I can't believe it. Like I'm in her, it was like I feel like I was in one of her books and there she is in front of me, like my literary hero. And she has an account and she's, and I'm looking at what she's buying and I was just so amazed. And so she got her stuff and left and I said, I want to open an account. Like I just thought if she I want an account. And I opened an account at that little market, which is the market that Mary Jane and Izzy, who she babysits, go to. I mean, in the book, Mary Jane, they go to that very same market where I ran into Ann Tyler, where her characters shopped, where she shopped, where I shopped. So it is a lot of it is an ode to her. It was.
Did you ever see her again and say, hey, would you like to go to coffee?
I did see her again. I was at this little cocktail party.
Oh.
I mean, there were like 15 people there or 20 people. There was this very small cocktail party and and I just knew a couple of people and I was talking to different people and everybody was interesting. I didn't know that many people. And then I start talking to this lovely older woman and it was like, because I was standing there, how I have social anxiety and I get shy. And so I'm always like standing there and I don't drink too. So I'm just holding some drink that looks like a drink. Like I just ask for water and I'll say, put a lime in it. So it looks like I'm drinking or something, So I'm standing there, awkwardly, like feeling self-conscious that nobody's talking to me. And there's some nice looking older woman. And I just turned to her and I said, hey, I'm just like, I'm looking for like a life raft. Like, I'm just like, nobody's talking to me. I'm all alone. Hey. And she said, hi, and we start talking. And it was like 4 sentences in when I'm talking to her and I'm thinking, it's her. Like I didn't, I was so sick in my head and nervous at first that I wasn't looking. And then it was her. And I just thought, oh. So I just told her, I didn't want to gush too much. She's at a cocktail party. It was like, I played it cool. I tried to be cool. I think I said something like,
she's amazing. She's totally amazing. She's totally amazing. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about the book a little. Okay. So I loved all the characters. I just love this juxtaposition of Mary Jane, who's kind of proper and she's being groomed to be somebody's good wife and a nice girl. And she becomes the nanny of this really raucous, freewheeling, fabulous family and this 5-year-old kid. And then this rock star and his wife come to live with the family. There are two shrinks. He's a patient of the Dr. Cone. And all hell plus Mary Jane seem to break loose. So first I wanted to know, I love that you said it in the 70s because I love the 70s and there's so much wild stuff going on there. But I wanted to know, what made you decide to set it in the 70s? How did you immerse yourself in the time period? Did anything surprise you? It seems like you got Baltimore exactly right. And the most important question, did you meet John Waters, who was in Baltimore?
Well, he actually lived right behind me in Baltimore.
You're kidding. Oh, my God.
Yes. So from my kitchen, I could look at his house. I'd look at, I'd do the dishes and I could see his house. And so I'm telling you, it's a town where if you name anyone, you run into them in Baltimore. It's like it's just a strange town. It's like there's only so many bookstores and restaurants and you run into everybody there. And so, you did see people. But so Baltimore, so the 70s, it's super fun. But the 70s, I thought
super fun
to be that innocent, to not know about sex or drugs or rock and roll or group therapy, or to do, you have to be pre-cell phone, pre-internet, pre-YouTube and YouPorn and everything. It has to be like, it's hard to be innocent now. There's nobody cannot.
Right. That's right.
I have 2 kids, and it's like they, no matter how much you protect them in your own house. Both of my kids told me that when they were 11 years old, they were at their friend's house, girls who had older brothers who showed them porn on a computer. It's like,
oh God.
So it was like, they both happened to be the same age when this happened. So I had to go pre all that stuff to have the right kind of, so she had to be old enough that she could tell the story, that she could be the narrator.
Right.
But then she had to be super innocent. And to take a 14-year-old today, they're
not innocent. They know everything.
I had to go back to the 70s. And then as far as research did, everything's on the internet.
Yeah.
The neighborhood's 100 years old. It was developed by the Olmsted brothers who did Central Park. And so the neighborhood looked, it wasn't hard to imagine that. The neighborhood looks exactly as it did 100 years ago. And then a lot of the customs in Baltimore are sort of the same, and a lot of the neighborhoods are the same as they've always been. So it was pretty easy, but I listened to 70s music constantly. It was just like everything. I tried to listen from 75. The book takes place in 1975. So I tried to listen from 75 back. But when you do serious 70s, on XM radio, you get the whole 70s. So that was fine. But I just listened to tons of music to kind of get in the head and in the headspace of a rock star and a movie star who would be really into music, and the psychiatrist and his wife who were into music. So I just kind of went to that place in my head, and I like thinking about it. I like listening to the music. I like, it was one conservative family, Mary Jane's family, where they have the picture of the president hanging on the wall, and they pray to him every evening. And, and then the Cone house where she babysits was chaos and disorder and Buddha and books and music and a mess and a refrigerator with really stinky cheeses and mold growing on everything and nothing's identifiable, which was actually like my childhood house was. The Cones had my childhood house, but I'm from Southern California in Baltimore. So the 70s, the story really had to take place in the 70s for it to be the story.
I think for music too, because now it's so hard for musicians because especially with the pandemic, nobody's touring, and even before that they really weren't, and musicians really weren't making any money, and nobody was discovered the way they are now. So so I want to sort of segue into the sense of, you have these wonderful oddball characters who they're so quirky and they're so surprising. Did they just sort of spring? I can't believe I'm asking you such a terrible question for a writer to ask a writer. Did they spring on the page? Of course they didn't. But how do you go about creating these oddball characters, and why do you think we all love them so much?
Well, I think I love them. So maybe that comes across in the writing. You know what I mean? Like I love all of them. Like I love, well, I mean, Mary Jane is pretty much me. She's a version of me. It would be,
She's hilarious.
to be 14 years old and to be in a house with a rock star, a movie star, a cute little kid, a psychiatrist, and his hippie wife, and to just sort of be able to do what you want, when you want, however you want, and listen to music and sing and dance and cook and iron and or alphabetize the books, which is what I would do because it's how I am. It just was like, sounds fabulous to me. But, of course, the story needs a conflict, it needs plot. So it was sort of just, she has to discover all these things, and things unravel a bit with her own family, who are much more conservative in contrast.
Yeah, I love that not only did the book address things where she was changed by living with this wacky family, but she also changed them. And I thought that was like, I just love that. Did you always know that that was what was going to happen, or did it sort of organically come out?
No, it did. Yeah. The way I write is, it's almost like a movie starts in my head, and then I open the computer, and then I write down the movie as I see it. So it's very,
Wow.
so it's just like, it just kind of happens. And then when I get to the end, then I sort of see what movie I just watched. And it was like, oh,
Can you teach me how to do that?
yeah.
So let's talk about. So you wrote. Did you find that writing the script helped you in terms of writing a novel, just in terms of where script is so visual, where this happens and that happens and that happens, where novel can be much messier. But did that inform your writing at all, do you think?
I don't know. I think I'm super, super disassociative. I get on the subway and I miss my stop because I'm immediately in my head in some, caught in some other world. Like, it's really hard for me to be present. Like, I'm constantly, either observing and thinking and, staring at somebody on the subway and just thinking about them and wondering about them. And then suddenly I realize I'm 3 stops past or something. So I think when I write, it's just that same state. I'm just like, I just seem to check out in these films roll. So I think no matter what I'm writing, it's always the same. Unless I'm writing, like when you have a book come out and they tell you, they ask
you have to write essays. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and the essays are really hard. Or even like if writing a bio, sometimes they get cobbled together by publicists and stuff, but there'll be something they ask for a bio. And like, to me, that's like, that'll take me, I can't even, it's so hard.
Let's talk about that, because I think a lot of probably a lot of new writers and a lot of readers don't realize that when writers do publish a book, one of the things you have to do is they want you to write anywhere from 6 to a dozen essays, because that makes people out there feel that, okay, they know something personal about you, and then you get a byline where you can mention your book. And it's really hard to do. You have to sort of go, I imagine you had to go through your book and find the themes and figure out, well, what can I write about that? And
Right.
what can I write about? I read one of your essays, which was wonderful, which is about moving from Southern California and then to Baltimore, where you sort of always felt like you weren't belonging.
Like
right?
an outsider. Yeah.
Like an outsider. Yeah. Can you talk about that a little, please?
Yeah. No, it was about, like, I was born in Boston. My dad was in graduate school, and I was freaked out by kids. Like, kids just seemed out of control to me. And so I used to just take a purse and put on some pearls and take off my clothes. I don't know why nakedness was, and I would sit in a chair and watch kids play, but I wouldn't play with them. But I thought I was grown up. And then we moved to Ann Arbor, where my brother was born and my father got his first job. And I couldn't understand kids. Like, I would look at them, and it was like a bunch of wild, feral aliens that were just running around and screaming, and they were so out of control. And I couldn't deal with them. And so my only friend was this maybe she was 70 or 75-year-old woman who lived across the street. And so I would just sit with her and have tea, and we'd watch kids playing outside, and, and I read books all the time. So I would always read, and I'd play with dolls and talk to my dolls. But
that's an essay. That's an essay, Jessica. You and that old woman. That's a really good one. AARP.
Yeah. I just couldn't relate. And then when I got to Southern California, I did make friends there, and I did have friends, but we were still like, our house was everybody else went to church, and they all had these really clean houses, and they all had these mothers that made dinner, and dinner was, or just packed lunch. Everything was just so organized and together. And, we were Jewish, and my parents went to the nude beach, and they grew marijuana in the backyard, and our house was it was just like chaos. The house was a mess, and there were records and books, and, it was, and I had a little brother who like was writing at like around age 3. He learned to spell, and he wrote F-U-C-K on everything all around the house. It was just like chaos, so
that's really funny.
Yeah, so I was still, even though I was an insider with my friends because I had this pack of girlfriends, it was like you entered my house and we were still, we were the Munsters, we were the oddballs. So, so I never had that insider feeling. And then I went to school up north in Northern California, and I was this blonde beach bunny, and everybody else was clove cigarette smoking intellectuals, and I felt like an idiot. And then I went to Canada, and I was like the friendly American, and everybody, I think I wrote about in that essay. I remember talking to a woman, just looking for friends. I was like, I just wanted people to hang out with, talking to a woman. And suddenly she was like, I'm happily married. I have a husband. I'm married. And I thought, oh, I want to have sex with her. And I said, oh, I'm just looking for someone to go work out with at the Y. I was just like, and I thought, oh, I'm too friendly. Like, I'm smile too much. It's almost like I could never figure out how it worked, and then I moved to Baltimore, and it was the same, it was the same thing. But then what happened in Baltimore was like, I was looking around and I thought, oh, the weirdo outsiders rule here. It's like John Waters and Frank Zappa and, Cab Calloway, Monique. Wallace Simpson, what was her last name? Wallace Simpson, the one who married Edward VIII, and he abdicated. It was like, the strange people.
And I would imagine
this is a place of,
there's not so many oddballs in New York anymore, but there still is. So you must feel at home here, right?
In New York? Yeah. No, in New York I do. It depends on the neighborhood. Like sometimes, you go down to Soho or the cool neighborhoods, and it's like, oh, the coolest people in the world. But I think that I just don't really care. Like at this point, I'm happy to be an outsider. I'm happy to sit and observe. I'm happy to be invisible, to sit in a corner and watch everyone. And I always was, but I was just such a, it's harder when you're a kid.
It is. And so talking about being invisible, which you surely are not because of this book, let's talk about fame. Let's talk about fame, both your own and with Mary Jane, she gets a taste of singing because she sings along with Jimmy, which is just wonderful. And Sheba, greatest name ever, by the way. And she discovers her own talent. So I wanted to know, if you could talk a little bit about how you developed that, about what it means to Mary Jane to find her own talent rather than just admiring somebody else's, and what it means to you to have all this acclaim. You've always had acclaim, but this book seems to me like it's blowing up. It's like everybody's talking about it, which is so wonderful.
Oh, that's nice.
How does it feel?
Well, it's not, like I said, when I saw that In Style, the New York Times review was just like, maybe it was like I was choking. It was so amazing. And then that In Style review, I looked at it and I actually teared up. I thought, oh my God, it was such a great, it was just like, what? Like cry. No, it's, because we're always, how it's like you're always you in your head, this, weirdo, and then these things outside happen. No, it's like right now, the book just came out yesterday. So I'm sort of in the middle of trying to catch up and
it's on fire, and you are on fire. It's so great. So I have to ask you, because I always want to know this, and I especially want to know this, what's Mary Jane doing now?
Oh,
in 2020.
Somebody else asked me that, and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of an interesting question," because I love the idea of these characters living on.
Yeah, I want to know, what's her never-ending story? Where is she? What does she become?
Well, so there's what I would hope for her. Like, I would hope that she would go to college in New York, because you need her to get out of Baltimore and go do what she wants. And I would hope that she would end up singing. And somehow I imagined her sort of like being like Sheryl Crow, like, because she's sort of shy and she's not used to being the center of attention. So being a background singer with somebody, a background singer, and then suddenly it's like, you just can't deny it. And she moves out front, like Sheryl Crow is Michael Jackson's background singer, was on tour with him. And then, and then she just kind of broke out. So I sort of see Mary Jane like that. And of course she would be a mother and she would have kids because she loved mothering Izzy when she was her summer nanny. So
I love it.
Yeah. So I know, it's fun to think of them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I always want them to be okay.
Yeah.
So the New York Times critic said that Mary Jane is tailor-made for a TV series. And I agree. I mean, who wouldn't want to watch something that's smart? It's so smart and so funny. It gets in your heart. So are you writing the script? Are you thinking of that? And if so, who would be your Mary Jane?
Oh, who do you think? I mean, it's so good.
I don't know. I mean,
I guess it could be someone who they have to play 14, but they could be like 18 or 19 and play 14.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it has to be. I mean, I don't know who would play her. Yeah. Do you think it'd be a better movie or series?
I think a limited series. I think a limited series, like just like over like maybe like 4 or 5 episodes. That would be perfect. And I say a limited series rather than a movie because a movie would just end, and I want it to go on. Because the characters were so fabulous. Anybody out there who has questions for Jessica, we would love to see them, and I would read them. Let me see. I have to move this across so I can see the questions. I have another question for you, which is, I always want to know. Oh, here it is. Never mind. I'll give you Sarah McCoy's question. Hi, Sarah. Jessica, would you describe yourself as a visual narrative writer, seeing your stories as movies? And if so, do you do storyboards or do you plot on paper and outlines? What a great question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I usually have a central idea that's like 1 sentence long. And I will write that at the top of the document and I start writing the book. And then at the end of the whatever writing time, I'll write in all caps what I'm going to write next. Like next, they're going to blah, 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 blah. And I'll sort of come up with the story as I go along. But then the next day when I sit down to write, something changed and I might not do that. I might do something totally different. So then I just write forward and then I might change that first sentence at the top of the document. So it's sort of like I'm plotting it as I go along. And then by the time I get to the end, usually that first sentence is totally different and I rewrite it. And then, so it's almost like I get to the end, I figure out what I did, and then I rewrite the whole book now knowing what I'm doing. Now knowing what it's about. So it's just, building, adding on.
That's really, really interesting. So the question I was going to ask before is, I always want to know, because whenever I start a new book, I feel like, well, I already did this, so I should know what to do. And then I never do. It's like writer's amnesia. So do you feel like the lessons of Mary Jane will help you write your next book? Or do you feel like, no, it's just a totally new book and it's going to be whatever it is?
No, it's like terrified all over again. I sit down and I just think, oh my God. Well, and I just think, can I do this? Am I smart enough? Can I actually do this? Like, I just sit down and like give myself, sometimes I just stick my head on the table and I just think, give me brilliance. Like I'm just asking someone, the world to give me the ability to do this. Like help me.
I love that you said that, because when I think of you, I always think that you're such a brilliant writer that it just sort of, ideas spark, and I just think, oh, Jessica would never have the problems I have. I'm sure she can figure out plot.
No, it's just like help me. I mean, there's only one thing I figured out, and that is, even if you don't know what to do, you have to do something.
Right.
It's almost like you just do anything, because if you do something, you'll move forward, and then what you have to do will come to you.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. That's right. Just
do anything.
Okay, and we have a question from the wonderful Mary Weber O'Malley. Did you audition many narratives before you found Caitlin? Oh, I am going to mispronounce her name. She deserves the audio award for narration of your book.
Okay, first of all, I didn't know there was an audio award, but she is unbelievable. So what they do is they send me, the audio department send a bunch of audition tapes. And these people, they're all have these beautiful, wonderful voices. I mean, they're all amazing. But for some reason, and this batch of people, they were all beautiful and they were amazing. But for this book, like everyone I listened to, it sounded like a tampon commercial. It was like special day, or it's like, when you're running and swimming, like everyone, or or like a house cleaning, but when those tub stains just can't get out. Like everything sounded like a cleaning product or something, and then I got to Caitlin's, and it was like, I mean, I had the chills, and I thought, I immediately wrote and I said, wait, can you get her? It was just like, if you can get her, I will die. So then they did get her. She starred in the show Prom on Broadway. She was a Broadway star, and she was nominated for, I don't know, what do they get on Broadway? Tonys or
Tonys.
Or
is it Obie? I don't know.
Something else. They get two things, Tonys and something else.
Yeah.
But she's been she's amazing. She's this wonderful human who has this incredible voice that was amazing. And then she would do like Jimmy's voice. She was going to go, and then she would do Sheba's voice. She was going to go like this. And then she would sing, because as they're singing in the book, and for Sheba's voice, she like did this really, it was just like this beautiful voice. She seriously, I didn't see the name of the person who said that, but whoever they were, they're so right. It was like, I feel so, I'm knocking on wood, like how lucky can it be that you write a book and then you hand it to some person you've never met before, and she just she created this life. It was amazing. She's so good. I haven't met her in person, but I have actual love for her. It's like, oh, I love her. She's amazing.
That's wonderful. Do you read your own books out loud to see how they would sound when you're writing them?
When I'm writing, I read everything out loud. Yeah. Sometimes I work in cafes a lot. And so suddenly somebody was staring at me, and I look over, and then I was just reading out loud. Yeah, because they always say dialogue out loud, like almost as I'm typing it.
I once did that on the subway, and the person got up and moved away from me.
And I gesture too. Like if I'm writing a gesture, it's like so as I'm writing, I'm constantly doing.
Yeah, I always do the hand movements.
Yeah.
Did you always want to be a writer? And how do you feel that writing saved you? Could you ever have seen yourself in an office or anything?
Well, so when I first graduated from college, I was in the buyer's training program for iMagnum, which was like a very kind of fancy department store at the time. And so I could, but I'm telling you, I was like insane. Like I would do things. So at the buyer's training, you start on the sales floor, and then you're managing, and then you're doing this. So when I was on the sales floor, I think the urge to create is overwhelming for me. When I was on the sales floor, whenever there was nobody around, I took these giant cardboard hold tags, and I made paper dolls of every single person on the floor. And soft toys too. And then I would get these, all the saleswomen were these older women who'd been there for decades. And I was just there because I was in the buying program. And I would get this wonderful older Yugoslavian woman to play paper dolls with me. And we do everybody's voice. There was like a Greek woman there, and I do her voice. And there was a French woman, and there were these two Canadian sisters, and she was from Yugoslavia. I would do her voice. And so, so I had to draw everybody and play paper dolls. And then when I was a manager, then I'm managing a department. I was a manager. I'd meet with the store manager, and and she'd be talking about the new season, what's coming. I said, let's do a skit. Let's do a song and dance. And I remember once I just got sales girls, and I choreographed. We put on layers and layers of all the new stuff, going down to a dress at the bottom. We weren't going to get undressed. And I taught them Adelaide's dance from Guys and Dolls, the strip tease. And so for the whole employees, we took off all the clothes, and we did a strip tease down to a dress.
Oh, that's hilarious.
It was like I couldn't do it straight in a way. Like I couldn't show up at work and just be straight work. Like I had to do this other stuff. And so I think
it's in your genes. It's really lucky that you discovered that. Did you write as a little kid?
I just constantly wrote in a diary. So I was sitting quietly observing everything and watching everyone and writing it down. And my diary had dialogue. And I didn't realize I was writing, but they all had dialogues and scene and setting. I was just
unbelievable
writing in diaries for years. And whole life.
Do you still have them?
No, everything I have is gone.
Oh,
story, but everything
okay.
I had is gone. So
Okay, so we have another question. What surprised you about writing this book in particular?
about writing it, maybe how, I mean, you don't want to say easy because writing is not easy, but
No, but sometimes things flow better than other
right.
times.
Sometimes they kind of fall out of you.
Yeah.
This was just falling out of me in this really nice way. Like every time I sat down, like I didn't want to weep. Every time I sat down, I wasn't like crying and like praying for brilliance. I wasn't like, I pretty much sat down and just did it, and it's great. I mean, and then when I got the ending, I struggled with a lot
Why?
because I always write bad endings, and then I have this genius
You
editor.
do? No, you don't.
Well, because they've been worked, but I have this
Oh,
genius editor, Kate Nitzel, and she's edited all my books, and every book I've turned in, she's like, "Great, the ending is terrible." Like, yeah, you can't do that. Like, yeah.
So how does she get you to a good ending? Like what?
So they all are like, every ending is like maybe the 5th or the 6th or the 7th or the 8th ending. So it'll be like, so I think she's thinking it through. She'll say, so the ending, the first one, she's like, "No, you can't end it there. It's terrible." And then she's like, "It needs to go a step further, whatever." So then I try something and she's like, "Nah." So I think what happens is I give her something and that helps her see
What you
what's
need to
wrong. Yeah.
do?
She'll be like, "No, I think it has to have more focus on the mother." And then I give her something. It's like, "No, I think it needs more reconciliation." And then I give her something else and she'll be like, "I really think you need to feel this at the end." Like she just is she's just so smart and intuitive, and like she can just nail it. And like I know I fully trust her. And so it's not like she said, I never argue it. I'm never like, "No, that's the ending." I mean, it's like, she just knows. I mean, when people tell you something,
Right. And if you feel it in your gut.
you feel it in your gut.
Were you writing this during the pandemic?
I wrote so much of it during the pandemic. I mean, because I wrote it really quickly and then was like revising it and rewriting it. And the entire ending, it was like 3 months or 4 months writing the ending, just the end. That was all in the pandemic.
That.
Yeah. So no, it was.
I love it. I know that a lot of times people don't realize how valuable a good editor is.
Oh,
They just save you and they find the things that you're so deep in the novel, you can't possibly do it yourself. You just don't.
no, she's amazing. And also it's almost like I have a tendency to go too far sometimes, like.
What does that mean?
The gross out factor is really, you know what I mean? Like I could and she'll just be like, "It's too far, pull that back." Like nobody wants to see it.
Okay.
She'll just be like, "Nobody wants to see it." I'm like, okay. So she's sort of like a voice of reason. It's like, oh, okay, nobody wants to see that.
That's so great. So do we have other questions from anybody out there? Okay, which character was the most fun for you to write and to explore? And I want to just tack on, and why?
Well, I think Jimmy and Sheba, the rock star and the movie star, and I mean, Jimmy, I loved imagining him, and I loved like you see stars and we just see one side of them. Right. But I love going into this tender, authentic side of them. And I love being with this guy who just wants to play guitar and just wants to have enough money to buy guitar strings and a pick, and happens to end up famous and isn't comfortable with fame. Like just, and like, just, you can just see why he just wants to play great music, but he's famous and it's, he's happy to get the money, and he gets Sheba, this beautiful woman, and they genuinely love each other. And, and he has problems, of course, but no, I loved him. And I loved Sheba just because she's a glamorous movie. When how it is when you're writing a character, you are that character, and it's like,
you are that character.
A beautiful movie star.
So how did you say goodbye to your characters? I mean, do you feel, the book is just out, it's just pretty, so it's so brand new. Do you still feel the characters whispering around you, or are you invested in new characters yet?
Well, I'm in the middle of another book now where I'm praying for brilliance every day. So
help me. I think you have it already.
help me. So, yeah, you do talk it's like when the book comes out, and just talking to people like you and readers and people on Instagram, it's nice to hear people say things. It's nice to feel that the characters are alive. But I think, I mean, I'm so busy and it was such a crazy year. It was so, I mean, did you see that Saturday Night Live skit where they did the party after the post-pandemic party? And everybody says the same thing. One of the things they say is it's such a crazy year. So I hate that I just said that, but
but it is, and it was like
right.
And it still is. And now people are so anxious about going back in society.
Yeah. So this book, and when I finished, nothing was the way things normally are for me.
I just want to say that I think it's the perfect pandemic and post-pandemic book because it's so full of life. I mean, those pages just crackle.
Aww.
They're just like sparks are coming out of the pages. Any other questions? We have time for one more question. Oh, this is from Rachel Cantor. I love this. I love this question. How can you be so wonderful and amazing?
She's amazing, and I love her books. I mean,
I love you, Rachel. This is wonderful. This is we share, Jessica and I share the same amazing agent, Gail Hockman, who is
Rachel did. She's always going to like colonies and stuff where she goes alone. She went to one colony where she was like all alone on an island or something. Like to me, like, and now we've had
that's amazing. I couldn't do that, Rachel.
To me, being alone is like torture. I mean, I was alone in the pandemic because my kids were, they're in their 20s and they'd moved out with their boyfriends, and I was alone in the pandemic. And I was thinking, I kind of rather go to prison. At least I have like people to hang out with in the yard and like shower with. Like, I just hate being alone. But Rachel will go anywhere alone. Like she's like this, an amazing brain that can just be alone and not feel alone, I guess.
Rachel, that's an essay. I'm sorry, I'm in essay writing mode now. Yeah. So I'm always looking for essays, but that's a really good opinion piece for like the New York Times. You should write it.
How to write it. Yeah. Yeah. I need help. Yeah.
Okay, do we have any other last questions? Oh, yes, I do have another question. It's about the incredible cover of your book. And also you showed me they had a record in there. Can you show us? It's so great.
This is the cover. I love the cover. This was, often they send you a cover and then you send it back and this was the first one they came out with. It was like, they did it and it was like,
it's great.
Yeah,
it's perfect.
I loved it right away. And this was some publicity. I have these two great publicists, Eliza and Danielle. And Danielle came up with this, which is she made this little 45 record.
It's so perfect. It's so perfect. And look at that. Oh my God. Are there actual songs on there?
No, it's not a real one. And then it's got a piece of paper with blurbs and stuff, but it's
that is so cool.
She does the most amazing things, and she did a giveaway for a record. She just came up with all these clever ideas.
It's amazing. Even the font is so 1970s.
I love that font. I love the
perfect. Yeah. So, I forgot to ask you, Jessica, what's your favorite indie bookstore that we can call out, so people can order your book from them?
Oh, well, anywhere, but in Baltimore, since this is a book about Baltimore, everybody should go to Atomic Books and the Ivy Bookshop. There's two great indies in Baltimore, and it's just like, Atomic and the Ivy, which serve all the great Baltimore weirdos. And I
love that. That should be their tagline.
Yeah. And down the street from me here is the Strand.
Oh, the Strand is great. The Strand is great. Also, you can go to bookshop.org, which will find the indie bookstore of your choice. We need to support bookstores.
Right. And then in DC,
and which one? Oh, right. And also Jessica's book.
So in DC, East City Books, East in DC, and a great good place for books in Oakland.
That's a great one too.
Many great ones. Wait, can I say one more?
Chaucer's one.
Santa Barbara.
Oh, Chaucer is great.
That's a great one.
Yeah. They're all wonderful, and they do so much for readers and so much for writers, and they build community. And also, I'm telling you, this book is so great. You're going to want to own it. You
Aw.
want it in your hands. So
Thank
go and
you.
buy it. And if there are no more questions, I want to say to Jessica, I'm just so thrilled to be here with you. It's so much, you're
Aw.
so much fun. I
Aw,
love you.
thank
And I
you
love
so
your work. And thank
much.
you so much for being here. And thank everybody in the audience for being here. Read books, buy books. Be an outcast and everything else.
Go
And
independent bookstores. Yeah.
yes, and thank you all so much for
Thank
being here.
you. So nice to have me.
Bye.
Thank you.
Jessica, stay on.